This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. Don't miss a moment on or off the field. Make every day a highlight with LASIK at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIK.
Hello and welcome back. Edward Osovich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios on historic Campus Quarter, and it won't be too long before this place is infiltrated. There is going to be a ton of people already kind of showing up into the Dormitory. You just feel it. Like, I don't know. Maybe this is something that I just kind of believe in my brain, but
it is.
Anytime that I'm like down here, it's like, okay, I kind of feel like this is a big one.
Yeah, you definitely build it up in your brain.
Okay,
We all do.
So that's not real?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it is real that it's a big one, but I think that you
can't
start
feel it in the air.
Friday. You do.
Okay.
I think Friday you feel it in the air. Kids are skipping class, but
No doubt.
I think today it's still, Thursday or whatever. It's.
Maybe when you walk over to the college game day set, it starts feeling a little bit more
that's what
real.
I mean. Friday, it's up and everything. People are, again, students aren't in class. Like,
it's the Game Day Preview. Welcome in. OU Michigan, 6:30, primetime. Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, who joined the family business. You can see that here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. Thought that was really cool.
It's awesome.
Really great interview looking at kind of both sides of this thing. We both talked to Josh Pate. You can also see that on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. There is a ton going into this one, and I think on paper, this thing feels like it is being built up as the best game of the weekend for a reason.
yeah, I mean, it's because there's just not a lot of good football games this weekend, but also I think you look at these two programs and specifically these two teams, there's a lot of similarities. And we'll get to the interview with Clayton Sayfie, who, joined us from the Michigan side of things. And, I think both these teams come into this with some questions, looking for some answers. And I think both fan bases want to believe in this, both these teams in terms of, can they be a playoff contender? Can they compete for the Big Ten and the SEC championships? Like, all of those questions, it's not that they will be totally answered this weekend, but you'll feel a lot either better or worse about your team after Saturday night.
You wrote about it on Thursday, and we talked to Josh Pate about it just in terms of Brent Venables. I mean, I think that this has been circled for a reason to continue what you would hope is momentum into conference play. Obviously, you got a couple more non-conference games after this, but Auburn is right around the corner. You wrote, this is the biggest game that he's coached in. This is a massive game on and off the field for Oklahoma.
Huge. And you talk about the recruits that are going to be in this weekend and what it could mean for your program there long term, but also this season. And, these are the type of games Brent hasn't typically won. I wrote it in the story, but, he's 4-5 against top 25 opponents and 2-4 against top 15 opponents during his time at Oklahoma. So these are games that maybe Oklahoma hasn't fared well in. You think back to the 2023 Texas game, that was obviously a huge win. They need that kind of a win on Saturday. And I think for Brent, we all know what's at stake this year. We'll see how the season plays out and then make an evaluation at the end. But if Brent and this team want to achieve the goals that they think they can this year, this is a game you have to win.
Go all the way back to Monday when we talked to a number of players, a number of guys on the defensive side of the ball that will be tasked with, coming up with some answers to stop Michigan. Obviously, the physicality is something that was brought up time and time again when we're talking to players, as well as Bryce Underwood's name. We'll get more into him here in a second, but what do you think the vibe was? I know it was Monday. You're just coming out of the season opener, but for them to have to flip the switch now with Michigan coming to town, it's fun for us, and I'm sure it's a hell of a lot of fun for them getting to be involved in something like this.
Yeah, and I think talking to them, they like to maybe downplay it a bit in a way where it's like, it's just another game and all of those sorts of things. But you also heard, guys like Kobe McKenzie talk about how much he relishes the fact that he gets to play in a game like this. And so I think the players know how big of a moment this is, what this could mean for them, and also just how good Michigan is and how well they're going to have to play if they want to win.
All right, let's get into a little bit of the video from Monday with OU players. Kobe McKenzie, Drencher Williams, really kind of the leadership core. J.D. Jackson also talked, as well as Kendall Daniels, about Michigan coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, every opponent is different, obviously, but every game's important. It's going to be really exciting. There's going to be a lot of people here. I was thinking about the game last night, watching Miami Notre Dame, and I was just getting chills thinking about this game, and the atmosphere is going to be here this weekend. So it's going to be really exciting, man. I'm excited for the week to get here.
Yeah, Michigan, they got a championship culture, 2 years removed from being in the college football playoff. They know what it takes. They're a physical team. That's kind of what the Big Ten is based on. So we're preparing for that. We know what the challenge has ahead of us, but great week of preparation will get us ready.
When you guys, you go to the sideline, you're not watching, what the other defense is doing, but is there a little bit of a pride factor in this of people, are going to compare your defensive line to their defensive line as two of the better ones in the country? You kind of want to win that matchup just on television almost?
Yeah, I think, our whole group wants to be, needs to be actually the number one. So that's what we're striving, We don't really look at the charts and whatever, but it's definitely a factor. Like, it puts us in a place where we need to work harder every single time.
Obviously we got to take it week by week, prepare. We understand what's at stake, but we understand what's at stake every week when you're at OU. Every team's you're gonna get everybody's best shot. We got Illinois State's best shot, and we're gonna get Michigan's best shot. So we got to prepare the exact same.
They're a really sound defense, and they got a really good offense, running game, and they got a really good young quarterback that's really good. And he was the number 1 recruit, so he's gonna come in here and he's gonna show flashes, and he's a really good guy. And their coach, he's a really cool dude, and they want to run the ball, and so it'll be a fun game on a grass field.
How do you handle a week like this? I mean, you just try and shut yourself off, just focus on football, going out to practice, and I would imagine students probably coming up to you saying, things about the game. What's that like going through that?
It is pretty crazy. It is still surreal to me, but just locking in, just doing my business. The little things, if that's waking up to make my bed, the little things really do matter, and I feel like that's going to carry on to practice, which carries on to the game day.
Right. The intensity isn't going to change. We are who we are. You can't change your punch on game day. So you got to be who you are. And most importantly, man, I know that everybody in that building that we're with right now on the defensive side of the ball couldn't be more excited for the challenge. I know that for a fact.
7 days ago, Bryce Underwood was getting ready to go into his first collegiate game. Now he's preparing to go into his first collegiate road start. Obviously, things went well. 34 to 17, the final score. 17 to 34 probably wouldn't be the numbers we're looking for. 34 to 17, final score in the New Mexico game. Bryce Underwood goes 21 of 31, 251 yards, and now Oklahoma's tasked with trying to find a way to slow this guy down.
Yeah, and look, I think the big matchup everybody's kind of talked about is Brent Venables versus Bryce Underwood,
Sure.
and I saw the stat today. Shout out Richard Johnson of CBS Sports. Brent Venables 21-5 against true or redshirt freshman quarterbacks since he was the Clemson defensive coordinator as well as Oklahoma's head coach. So he's fared pretty well in these type of matchups. I don't know if he's faced a freshman quarterback as good as Bryce Underwood. We'll see. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the big question mark. He looked fantastic in his first collegiate game. Big guy, certainly physically, he does not look like a true freshman. So Oklahoma will have their hands full. I feel like Brent's going to throw a lot at him. And I think it was interesting kind of talking to some of the players this week, too, just kind of their thoughts on him. And clearly they think very highly of him.
No doubt about it. Here are a number of Oklahoma defenders on the freshman quarterback, as well as Brent Venables talking Bryce Underwood.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of their game Saturday night, and he looks good. He doesn't look like a freshman. He looked very composed. He let the game come to him, so we're definitely going to have to get after him a little bit, but he looked comfortable back there.
I mean, I just listen to Coach, what he wants me to watch, and then I go watch it. Last game, it's just one game, and they probably didn't run a lot of their stuff. So I wouldn't say it was hard. It just, offense is going to run what offense is going to run, and their DNA, they're always going to go back to their DNA no matter who they got. So I'll just take that into the aspect.
A bigger dude, great arm. I think he showed a lot of, great flashes of what he could be, for that team across the future. I think they did a lot of good things with their offenses and everything. And, I think they got, a bright future with him.
He's a guy that, man, he's, as I said to open up, man, he's a little different. And, again, it reminds me a lot of a Trevor Lawrence, just quick, decisive, accurate, poised, tough, consistent, and there's a reason he was the number one player in America, and he's got a maturity and a work ethic and leadership ability that go along with that. So just really we look at, what's it going to take to win? How do you win? What's the formula to win? And there might be byproducts of that. This guy doesn't perform well and so forth, but it's really about us. It's about the fundamentals. It's about the effort. It's about the physicality. It's about putting ourselves in position to be successful based on, what is on tape, and don't get into a lot of the conjecture.
Brent Venables talking about freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood, who, as we said, making his first collegiate start. You would imagine that the way that this thing has been built on paper, Oklahoma defensive line, they have to have one of their better performances that maybe they've had since Brent has come back to Oklahoma. You would think, though, with that group, they played pretty well last week, need to take a step. I thought maybe he was sending a little bit of a early message in the the early morning hours of last Saturday when he was meeting with us, talking about how he thought they were a little soft against Illinois State.
Well, yeah, and look, it's a group that we've talked a lot about this offseason. They've gotten a lot of national praise. They have a lot of veteran experience, good young talent. They got to prove it on Saturday. Like, these are the type of games that you should walk out and say, man, OU's got a great defensive line. You think back to that, like that Miami Notre Dame game. I walked out of that saying, man, Miami's got a great defensive line. Like, if you want to be in that category of a group that's an elite group, this is the game to do it against a Michigan offensive line that I think is retooling, rebuilding, but they feel pretty good about and has been really good over the years. Like, Oklahoma should go in and have their way, not just every single time, but make some big plays in this, and that starts up front.
Let's flip it over to the other side. Michigan front seven. Obviously, you lose a guy like a Mason Graham. I think everybody involved on the Norman side of things happy about that. Happy that Kenneth Grant's now moved on to the NFL as well. OU offensive line-wise, they got their work cut out. Obviously, it was not great last week. We heard from Brent Venables as well as Bid Arbuckle talking about the Michigan front seven. A lot of veteran guys, even though they're not the guys that were obviously getting drafted in the first day of the NFL draft a couple months ago.
It's a really good group, solid across the board. Is it the best defensive line Oklahoma will face this year? I think you could put it in that category. Sure. I think it's somewhere. We'll see how it ends up at the end of the season, but Oklahoma's offensive line is going to have to play well. I mean, it's the biggest concern right now, I think, for a lot of people, and rightfully so, considering last year and even last week in terms of the way the offensive line is played, and also what the group's going to look like. Like, who's going to run out there first? We're sitting here on Thursday, and I have no idea. And, from my understanding, it's been kind of a different group every single day this week in practice. I think they're trying to get a lot of guys some reps, a lot of guys some looks. I think you're going to see multiple dudes get out there and play against Michigan. Can they find the right five? Can it click? Can they find some success on the ground? Because I think that you will have some success through the air. John Mateer is going to find some guys open, but you're still going to have to be able to run the football, unlike they were able to last week.
Things could change, but want to throw a couple names at you. Yep. Michael Fasusi, good to go?
Yep.
Derek Simmons?
Yep.
Jacob Sexton?
I wouldn't be. He might suit up. Will
Sure.
he be available? I'm not sure.
Heath Ozida?
Yeah, he'll be available.
Okay. I mean, you at least have more options than you did a week ago against Illinois State. Obviously, that front seven matchup on both sides of the ball for both teams, whichever way you want to look at it, it's probably if you win that battle, your team's going to have a better chance to win the game.
Correct.
Always kind of obvious in the sport of football, even more so this week. Here is Brent Venables and Ben Arbuckle, as well as a couple of offensive linemen, talking about what they saw from Michigan's front seven.
They're a physical team. They are who they say they are. They're going to bring it, and we have to bring what we can do. You know what I'm saying? We have to bring it every play. Physicality. They're a physical team, and it's going to be a fun game.
Physicality. What did you learn from all the SEC defensive lines you played last year, as far as like the next level you personally had to take to be prepared for a line like Michigan's?
SEC, Big Ten, those are the most physical leagues. You have to be ready to come off the ball every play, every snap. You got to make sure you have all your techniques right, your pad level right, and you have to make sure your body's in good condition, because if not, those guys are too good to not be at your peak performance. You're going to lose if you're not.
Yeah, the depth, is probably the first thing. They lost several players, but they still have, so many, really good players, up front. I think it's just they've got 7 players on defense who started at least 10 career games. That's a lot for what was supposed to have graduated a lot of guys. So they're very well coached. They're long, they're athletic, they're physical. They play with great effort, a lot of confidence. They got good culture. Jumps off tape.
Physical, they're stout, they're well coached. They understand their gap integrity, and they do a really good job at the point of attack, whether it's in shedding run blocks or or rushing the passer. They do a really good job, so they're sound. So we have to bring our best. They're really good players, so we have to bring our best in those moments, in those situations too. You look at it, I think their linebacker position group, I think, is really good. I think they're really veteran players out there. They show up on film, they strike you, they're able to cover in space. So they've been really impressive, and they were really impressive whenever you watched them from last year's tape too. On the inside, they have the ability to throw a whole bunch of different guys out there. Last year it was mainly those 2 defensive tackles who ended up getting drafted were in there. I don't know, 500 snaps last year, where this year they're able to cycle in more guys, keep their guys fresh. So I think that's a really good thing for them. But they're stout and they're well coached, and they're going to bring their best. So we got to bring ours.
We've talked about Brent Venables, coaching probably the biggest game of his tenure as Oklahoma's head coach. How about the second game of Ben Arbuckle's career?
Huge.
Going against a Michigan defense that certainly is going to present a challenge. They got to find a way to be able to run the football. With that said, we've talked a lot about Bryce Underwood. What about John Mateer in this game going in?
Yeah, it's huge. This is you always talk about Heisman moments,
sure,
right? And I know there's been a lot of talk, can Mateer, be a dark horse for the Heisman or whatever. You go and win a game like this and you perform well and you throw a couple touchdowns or have a late game score that, maybe propels your team, all of a sudden you are in that. So it's a huge game. Arbuckle and Mateer, I don't think have ever, this is probably the biggest game of their careers. I wrote the story about it's the biggest of Brent's, at least at Oklahoma. It's certainly the biggest for Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer their entire career. So it's a huge point. And I think like the chess match between those two guys versus a veteran guy like Wink Martindale. We talked earlier about Brent Venables versus Bryce Underwood and the advantage there. Wink Martindale's coached against some of the best quarterbacks ever.
Sure.
NFL defensive coordinator. He's going to throw a lot at Mateer and Arbuckle, and it's going to be interesting. How do they combat that?
It'll be interesting, too, because then we talked to Josh Pate about this. It seems like the winner of this game, the quarterback, he's going to kind of insert himself in that early conversation.
For sure.
To try to get to New York City. And I think a lot of people, for John Mateer, playing out in Pullman over the last couple of years, or obviously last year, probably didn't see a whole lot of him. This is going to be kind of their first, impression of somebody that is basically, you look down at the box score and holy hell, this guy's really good, but you didn't sit down and watch a whole lot of Washington State games, especially if you're living in New York or wherever.
Exactly, yeah. This is a chance for himself to kind of prove, how good he can be and how good he is. And, it's kind of crazy. I think it's only his 15th start as a college quarterback.
It's crazy.
So we talk a lot about Bryce Underwood being young. John Mateer technically still very young, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. And he was great last week, but he's going to have to play even better this week if Oklahoma wants to win.
I think if he throws for 392, Oklahoma feels pretty good.
I mean, more
about
like
himself.
You can't throw an interception,
Sure.
right? Like you can't miss some of the incompletions. Like he's going to have to be really sharp.
Turnovers are going to be most certainly a key. Before we throw it to our interview with Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine, let us tell you about Game Time. Probably headed down to Dorman this weekend. Get on Game Time. That's all you got to do. Go to gametime.co and pick out a ticket. George, we've been talking about it for the last year, and the thing that I love is you can download the app, you can pull it up, and you can see exactly where you want to sit. And as you said, George, the prices right now pretty damn good considering where they were about a week ago going into the season opener.
Yeah, those are good prices. I love how you can go on there and see exactly the view that you'll have for the game.
You choose the section, Game Time selects the seat, you save. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. All you got to do is take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code ON3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Really good prices right now if you're trying to sneak into Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium late.
Terms do apply.
Terms do apply. Always do. All right, let's go to our interview with the Wolverines. Clayton Sayfie getting a little bit of a better idea coming out of the New Mexico season opening win for Michigan as they head down to Norman. Here it is. We now welcome in Clayton from the Wolverine. And Clayton, Big game, obviously. Kind of weird that it's week 2, but you got the Bryce Underwood debut under his belt. Pretty good performance, 34-17 win over New Mexico. I want to talk about Sherrone Moore real quick before we get into the team stuff. Obviously, he had his press conference on Monday talking about his roots, going back to playing days in Norman. But what's this just experience been like with him taking over from the interim role, now officially the head coach, and just kind of the outlook overall for Michigan football in 2025?
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, really, since late January of last year when Jim Harbaugh took the Chargers job.
Sure.
I think it was obvious that it was going to be Sherrone Moore, given the timing, right? The carousel had already kind of passed. He was the interim coach for several games, that prior season when they won the national championship. So he kind of had his test run, and they won every game. So, the players loved him, all that. A little bit of a interesting, didn't keep as many coaches maybe as some people thought he was going to, had to make some hires on his own, and really didn't have a quarterback all of last season. I know Oklahoma struggled at that position too. There are a lot of parallels between the two teams, but it was a pretty rough watch offensively last year for Michigan. Cycled through 3 different starters. It settled on Davis Warren at a certain point. They were 5-5 going into senior day against Northwestern. They win their last 3, upset Ohio State, and beat Alabama, just like Oklahoma last year. So I think everything changed in late November when they landed Bryce Underwood. They got a bunch of recruiting momentum. They did really well in the December transfer portal. You'll see several transfers start for Michigan, on Saturday. So the outlook looks really good. They got a lot of young talent. They have some guys that have been here a while as well. And it's kind of that blend right now. I think the outlook in the next 2-3 years looks good, but this year with a freshman quarterback, nobody knows, but I'm sure we'll talk about it. It was so far so good with what we've seen from him. Saturday night was impressive.
Let's talk about it, because I think that's kind of what the big storyline is. Bryce Underwood, he is a true freshman quarterback, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, true freshman quarterback versus Brent Venables, but this is not your normal freshman quarterback. I know Brent talked about that, but what can OU fans maybe expect from him? I know it's only been 1 game, but what did you like? What didn't you like about his debut?
Yeah, I think from the time he came out for warm-ups until he walked up the tunnel after the game, he just didn't look like a freshman, right? Physically, he goes out there and he doesn't look like a freshman. The decision-making was really, really good. I think that was kind of the number one thing when you think about a freshman quarterback is what kind of decisions is he going to make? He's going to put the ball in harm's way. He didn't really do that. There were a couple throws where maybe a DB could have got their hands on it, a tipped pass towards the end zone. He could have put more loft on it, would have been a touchdown. Some nitpicky stuff. He had 10 incompletions, 4 dropped passes, several others that could have been caught. You wouldn't necessarily categorize them as a drop, but it was as good as you could have expected. I think better than a lot of people expected for a debut. It was New Mexico. That actually was a team that came out and played better than I think a lot of people thought. They had 75 new players, so you didn't know what to expect from them, but that they fought hard. They're a well-coached team, and the tough test will be this weekend. Yeah, can he handle the noise? Can he have the timing with his receivers when it's a little more chaotic and it's, however many thousand people screaming at him, and Brent Venables is, dropping R. Mason Thomas in coverage and bringing, Peyton Bowen on a blitz and things like that. So, all of that chaos is going to be what I think the big test is, but he didn't run at all on Saturday. We know he can do that. I think they were kind of saving him a little bit, didn't want him to take any shots. Everything was pretty much on schedule, which is impressive for a freshman, but also we'll have to see what it looks like again when I keep using that word chaos, but I feel like that's kind of the test for him is when things aren't going your way, or he does throw a pick, or, they are down 14-0 or 14-3. Like, what does he do then? That's going to be really when we know more about who he is. But again, he's passed the test with flying colors so far from everything you heard all of offseason. This kid got here in December for bowl practices. He went through winter conditioning. He went through spring practice, summer training, fall camp. He did every camp circuit. He was the number 1 recruit. He did, started 4 years in high school. He's as experienced as a freshman can be.
Yeah.
That said, he hasn't experienced anything like he will, in Norman.
Certainly seems like both these teams, just in terms of what they put on tape in game one, a little bit of a cat and mouse, not wanting to put a whole lot out there, not running John Mateer, much like not running Bryce Underwood. When we're talking offensive line, obviously Justice Haynes had a really good debut for Michigan, 159 yards on the ground. Just in terms of offensive line, what are we looking at, or what Oklahoma fans should be expecting up front that's protecting Bryce Underwood?
They struggled on the offensive line last year, and it looked quite a bit better in game one. Again, the competition, you don't really know for sure. But when you compare it to last year's opener and some of those games when they should have handled them and there were some issues, there weren't really those issues on Saturday. They opened up some really big holes for Justice Haynes. He had 2 really long runs, 56 yards for a touchdown, 58 yards down to the 1-yard line. Every time they're in short yardage situation, they picked up the first down. So checked a lot of boxes. The pass protection was good. Although Bryce Underwood, they got the ball out quick. When he did go deep, he was clean, but they got him on the move a little bit. And I imagine they'll do that again on Saturday to kind of, make sure that there aren't any issues there. But it's going to be a really tough defensive front to go up against. And that'll be the challenge for this offensive line. So four guys who started games for Michigan last year back on the offensive line, but a couple of them did not have great years. So, you can look at returning starters. A lot of us do when you look at teams, but, there are some, frankly, they went after some guys in the transfer portal they didn't get. They probably would have rather had some more competition, but I think it looked okay. And very good on some plays, and they've got good tight ends who block. They've got good receivers who block. So it's kind of the whole operation there. Watch out for number 44, the fullback, Max Bredesen, who is as good of a blocker pound for pound as anyone in the country.
I love that, a fullback.
Yeah,
I love that.
That offensive line sounds a lot like Oklahoma in terms of returning starters.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask you, too, just the playmakers around Bryce, because you mentioned Justice Haynes, and we all know that they're going to want to run the football, but who are some of these playmakers that OU fans should know?
Yeah, Haynes and Jordan Marshall, redshirt freshmen, are kind of the 1-2 punch in the backfield. Marshall didn't really get going much in this past game, and really just I think it was some circumstance, and maybe he didn't get quite the blocking Haynes did on a few plays, but he's good in short yardage. He ran for 100 against Alabama in the bowl game. So he's capable, and you'll see both of those guys, 23 and 22, respectively. And then tight end Marlon Klein really broke out. He had 93 yards, I think 6 catches, had his first career touchdown on a really nifty out-and-up route from the 15-yard line in a 2-minute type of situation. Great throw from Underwood. And 93 yards would have been the second highest yardage total for Colston Loveland in his Michigan career. He went number 10 in the draft last year. So it was, again, I keep saying this, but it was New Mexico. But, Colston Loveland plays those type of teams as well. They're going to use the tight end a lot, I guess is my point, and he looked pretty good. They may have Hogan Hansen returning, a sophomore tight end who flashed last year, more of the pass-catching tight end. So we'll see if we see him. And then the receiving core, very unproven, right? Indiana's Donovan McCulley, Indiana transfer, is kind of the number one guy. I think Oklahoma went after him as well in the portal, so people are familiar. He didn't really play last year. He was pretty good the year before, but on a bad Indiana team. He had a few catches the other day, didn't do anything crazy, but I think the everything around Bryce Underwood is, kind of been the question mark. Is the O-line in the wide receiving core good enough? They looked pretty good on Saturday, but again, it's one game against a Mountain West opponent. We'll see more on Saturday.
Kind of seems like there are some similarities between Oklahoma and Michigan. Let's flip over Wink Martindale's group. Let's start in the middle. Obviously, the suspension coming with Jayshawn Barham from his ejection in the second half of the New Mexico, the opener. How big of a deal is that? What are they going to do to, replace him for one half of football? And then we'll get into everything else on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, they were very disappointed, as I'm sure you can tell.
Sure.
With the call, and it seemed questionable.
Yeah.
But either way, right? He's not going to be out there in the first half. He'll be out there in the second half. He was playing really well. He started to play really well towards the end of last season. He's a freak. Looking at him, it's kind of incredible that he moves the way he does, how big he is. So it's a loss, but linebackers probably their best and deepest position group right now. Jimmy Rolder, number 30, who will start the game in his in replacement of Barham, is basically a starter that they consider him as. He played really well on Saturday with a ton of fire. He's been playing significant snaps going back to 2022, so he has a lot of experience. He's battled injuries throughout his career, but healthy now. And the number 23, Cole Sullivan, a redshirt freshman who is really athletic, had an interception and a sack last game and is kind of a freaky dude in his own right. He'll get some snaps too. So I would say if they had to have a starter go down, linebacker would be the best case position for them. But at the same time, you'd much rather have your starter out there.
Clayton, tell us a little bit about this defensive line, because it feels like Michigan has just reloaded up front every year. And I think for Oklahoma fans, their biggest concern coming into this game is, can their offensive line hold up against this Michigan defensive front? So what can you expect from that group?
I think both fan bases are thinking the same thing, and they're also noting that, right, both defensive coordinators are extremely creative, extremely aggressive. Wink Martindale on the defensive side. I think it's funny, on offense, I don't think Michigan wanted to show too much, although they did throw 31 times. On defense, they showed quite a bit. I think Wink likes to do that, where he's blitzing from all over and wants to put a bunch on tape so that you have to prepare for it. And then it might be something completely different coverage-wise, things that he's doing on the back end. I mean, the coverages they ran against Ohio State last year, the percentage of cover 2 and cover 3, just completely different than you saw throughout the whole year. So he kind of is in his bag in some of these bigger games. But back to your question about the defensive line, they rotated 10 guys in there, or really 9 or 10. They had one guy banged up. 6 on the interior, 4 on the edge. Really good and deep on the edge. The D tackles, they're not Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant, who both went top 13 in the draft in April, but some guys who've played a lot of football there. Rayshawn Benny would have been starting if he wasn't behind those guys, and Mozzie Smith and Chris Jenkins over the last several years. He's made big plays going back several seasons. Trey Williams from Clemson, Damon Payne, Alabama transfer. They've added quite a boost there. So they're deep. They're creative with what they do up front, especially on third down. But you don't have those guys that are going to win their one-on-one battles like 80% of the time anymore. But still, bunch of 300-pounders that are going to rotate through on the inside, and then a lot of disruptive guys on the edge that can get to the quarterback. We saw that from they laid a bunch of big hits on the New Mexico quarterback last week, and it came from a bunch of different guys, so a lot of capable players up front.
I think that was one of the first things that Brent made note of on Tuesday at his press conference was 7 guys that have started 10 games. When you're rebuilding, that's not a bad thing to fall back on. Quarterback safety, what are we looking at on the back end of Michigan's defense?
Safety's very good and pretty deep. They added TJ Metcalf, an Arkansas transfer, who will play nickel when they're in nickel, and then drop back to safety when they're in their base defense, which probably won't be as much against Oklahoma. The corner is a bit of a question mark for Michigan. Jair Hills, who they look at as their number 1 corner, but he got beat for a touchdown the other night. He had a pass interference in the end zone as well, and kind of had an up-and-down season last year when he was playing opposite of Will Johnson. Zeke Berry played really well, number 10, so he was solid, I thought, in the game, but depth is a little bit lacking there. So a lot of the pass defense is going to come down to how much pressure they can create.
Sure.
And then I think they're going to get their hands on a couple balls in this game. I thought John Mateer, he only had 7 incompletions last game. A couple of them could have been picked off beyond the one that was. He had a couple misses. I mean, he played outstanding, right? I'm nitpicking a little bit, but this game could come down to if Bryce Underwood makes that mistake, or if John Mateer makes that one big mistake, or if they make a big play, if Deion Burks, gets loose or something like that, or number 12, the tight end, who I forget his name, who looks like a dynamic athlete. The big plays on either side, I think, could determine this, whether it's a big mistake or just that big explosive.
Lastly, from me, special teams. I know that in a close game like this, that could come down to that. What's it look like at kicker, kick return, punt return, like all that stuff? How does Michigan feel about its special teams unit?
I think they have the best kicker in the country, field goal wise, Dominic Zavada, who, he was just incredible last year. 21 of 22. The only miss was blocked, and not even his fault. He made 7 from 50 plus. That easily broke Michigan's record for a career and a single season. And he goes out on Saturday night. The last 3 press conferences, I think, from Sherrone Moore, no one even asked about him anymore because he's such a given. He goes out the other night, makes 2 kicks, no drama. That's huge in an environment like this. He made the game winner at Ohio State last season. He's clutch. So I think that's huge to have on your side in a game that could be low scoring and close. When they get to the 35, they feel pretty good about running him out there. He made a 70-yarder in practice a couple weeks ago. So he is a guy who, when you talk to national writers, they were surprised that he didn't go pro this past season, but he's got still some more to prove here as a senior. Punt game, they got a new punter who was a little bit up and down the other night and has only really started 2 games. The return game, they fumbled a kickoff return. They fumbled a punt return and got it back. The kickoff return they did not get back. So special teams have been a pretty big talking point here the last few days. Definitely have some things to clean up there, and they've got to cover well. The coverage units were really good the other night, but number 5 for Oklahoma, it looks really dynamic.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Sorry, I don't know the names yet.
You're good. You're good.
Andrew Marsh, is he the one that's returning kicks back there for Michigan? That was a guy that Oklahoma and Michigan battled for at the end of his recruiting. Very good. All right.
He's going to be good. Yeah, he made a couple mistakes in the game, but yeah, he did fumble one, had a little loose out here, and a guy was hitting him low, so he was kind of being a little loose, and a guy hit him high and got the ball out. But he'll be good in time. But they've got to, you can't make those mistakes on the road. Hell, I would say a road team in a night game environment like this, just don't take it out of the end zone probably, but we'll see.
It seems like last one from me. We appreciate you taking the time today, Clayton. It seems like from the Oklahoma side of things, the fan base is extremely energized for this. It would seem that there's going to be a ton of Michigan fans making the trip, from across the country, really, to Norman, Oklahoma this weekend. What's the vibe of just the fan base right now for an Oklahoma, Michigan? I know that's kind of I don't know about a secondary storyline, but it's certainly a storyline when 2 blue blood programs go head to head like this.
Yeah, and Oklahoma's there aren't many teams that have Michigan has a losing record against. 0-1, the 1976 Orange Bowl. I'm sure there aren't many that Oklahoma has a losing record against either, but they have the edge here. And it's exciting. It's like a video game type of matchup. It's one of those ones you'd plug in the video game and pick the uniforms and say, all right, let's play this one in Norman, and next year let's run it back at the Big House. But it's exciting. Sherrone Moore coming back to his alma mater. He has not wanted to talk much about that and saying his emotional attachment is to the Michigan program, the Michigan players. I thought that was a cool line, but you got to know it means something to him, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of cool. Played there for a couple seasons. But yeah, I think that there'll be good Michigan representation. There has been on the road really throughout many years, but I'm thinking like last year at Washington and, these cool road trips they like to go on. Texas had a lot of fans in Ann Arbor last year. Oklahoma's going to have a lot of fans in Ann Arbor next season. So it'll be cool to see the 2 blue blood programs go at it. The fan bases have a lot of respect for each other, and really the programs are similar in a lot of ways. 951 wins, I believe, against 113. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Thanks, Clayton.
Really good stuff with Clayton. Looking forward to, meeting him. Don't think I've ever met him in real life, but once again, OU and Michigan, they don't cross paths too often.
No.
We were talking about OU's defensive line, and certainly if you want to be able to stop Bryce Underwood, you want to get him in 3rd down and long, right? You're going to have success on 1st and 2nd down defensively. You have a Michigan run game that, let's just be honest about it, very, very good. I mean, they run the ball extremely well. They've had for years and years and years. Now, I will say, a lot of the run game coming out of New Mexico came on 2 plays. It was a 56-yarder and a 58-yarder, I believe, from Justice Haynes, who Oklahoma fans saw a year ago with Alabama. It's kind of the keys here, George, for you.
Well, I mean, it starts up front. Obviously, this defensive line has to play well, but I think also the linebackers, they have to be assignment sound. We saw last week they gave up a couple big runs against Illinois State. I think that was mostly, assignment problems. Maybe Kip Lewis missed a tackle or Kobe McKenzie, Owen Heineke. The linebackers have to be really solid. But this, to me, is the key, to the game in a lot of ways, at least on that side of the ball. Because, look, they're not going to be afraid to throw the ball with Bryce Underwood. But I do think that there's a part of this where, like, hey, it's a true freshman quarterback on the road, 2nd game ever. Like, they're going to want to run the football. That's their DNA. That's what they've built this program on over the last, decade or so. So they're going to want to run the ball. I'm interested to see how much does Chip Lindsey, their offensive coordinator, trust Bryce Underwood. But yeah, if you're Oklahoma, you want to get him to 3rd and long. You want to force him to throw the football, sit in the pocket, get after him a little bit, give him some different coverages. So if you can stop the run game, I think Oklahoma should feel pretty good about themselves.
Here are a number of Oklahoma defenders talking about just that, snuffing out a Michigan run game.
He's got a great offensive line, a really physical group of guys. He's a very instinctual player, very powerful, explosive. He had great success in high school and just a young player at Alabama. I know he played, had a role, and probably looking for a little bit more of a of a role at Michigan, and certainly he found it. But a really good player. I know I've heard some of his interviews. A mature, wise young guy that's got strength as a leader as well. So he's tough to tackle. Got great speed. Both of their backs are really, really good players. So got our our hands full when it comes to stopping the run.
Yeah, they want to run the ball downhill, and I love it. Me personally, I really do. I feel like that's where I propel in my game. So, man, I couldn't be more excited, to be honest with you. I'm looking forward to the challenge. So, can't wait for Saturday to be here.
Communication. It was some of the plays was on me. I take blame for that just because communication and alignment and assignment is big here. So I just feel like if we get aligned better and communicate better, then we'll be just okay.
A lot of guys, sometimes even me, are just trying to make plays. So that means if we're getting out of our gaps, not doing our job, that can open holes and stuff. So just like I said, guys doing their jobs is what we need to do to eliminate those chunk plays. So
yeah, he has big playability for sure. And from what I remember, he was very patient. So we got to be very gap sound. I watched a lot of their games. I went back and watched a little bit of him at Alabama, not necessarily when he played us, but just to get some tape on him. I just wanted to see how he was with the ball in his hand. So he's a good player.
Kobe McKenzie talking about Michigan run game. It's going to be interesting. I think the Justice Haynes kid, he obviously had a really good debut for Michigan, but
what did he run against OU last year? I was just
in the Alabama game. I don't want to say that it was much, but then again, Michigan or Alabama didn't do a whole lot in that game either.
So I'll find it here in a second.
All right, very good. There are so many, I think parallels between this game and you could point as a lot as close as the Tennessee game a year ago, right?
Yeah.
With obviously Josh Heupel coming back to town. This time it's Sherrone Moore, and obviously he's going to be coaching, not serving the 2-game suspension quite yet for Michigan, but not much of a storyline just because I don't think it's been out there a whole lot this week.
Yeah.
But he did play for Oklahoma, had a really good career here in Norman, played 2 years, 2006, 2007, I believe. Was, I think teammates with Sam Bradford. So We'll see. He did talk about it up in Ann Arbor on Monday at his press conference. Here is Sherrone Moore and just his thoughts in returning to Norman this year.
Yeah, it's about my players. So there's no emotional attachment to it. I'm emotionally attached to the players that are at Michigan. They're my kids. I see Gio back there. I've known him since he was 15 years old, even though he looks 30. And yeah, Gio, I'm talking about Gio. But it's one of my kids. So these guys are who I'm emotionally attached to more than anything. And it's going to be an awesome atmosphere, don't get me wrong. It's a great town. And obviously I got my degree from there, and there's a love there. But these kids are what's special to me. So that's all I'm worried about. I'm worried about our players getting our team ready to go play this game.
What can you tell them about having experienced the environment and what to prepare for them?
Yeah, it's just it's going to be loud. It's a night game in an SEC environment, so it's going to be loud. So, but we've played in loud environments, but we're going to have to prepare for the noise.
I would imagine it is going to be loud. I think that is an accurate report from Sherrone Moore.
OU fans are going to bring it, I think.
And they have an opportunity. I think we talked a little bit about that with Josh Pate, just in terms of a freshman quarterback. You want to be able to present every challenge that is out there or possible for somebody like a Bryce Underwood.
And I think the OU fans did it last year in the Tennessee game. They affected Nico in that game, and Oklahoma just didn't take advantage. So I think OU fans are going to bring it. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere, and it is cool that Sherrone Moore is coming back. It's not the same emotion as a Josh Heupel when he came back, obviously, but he does have strong ties to the program. It's interesting. He mentioned he played with DeMarco Murray, Joe John Finley. Those were his teammates.
Sure.
They're on this coaching staff. He was coached by Brent Venables, albeit on the other side of the ball. But of course, he still has a lot of love for OU. But I also thought it was cool to hear him kind of say what he did about obviously having such good relationships with his players there at Michigan.
No doubt about it. It is definitely different than Josh Heupel returning to Norman, but I think that it kind of brings it a little bit more, maybe a little bit of juice that is added when you remember that it is Michigan and this matchup between the two is so unique. Well, what was it on Justice Haynes?
3 rushes for 18 yards.
Okay, yeah. Alabama,
so he didn't play a whole lot.
And Alabama just didn't do much.
No. And he only, he was kind of the second back last year. He only ran for 448 yards last year. But he was averaging almost 6 yards a carry.
Reason that you normally go into the transfer portal looking for better opportunity. Not to say that he is a soothsayer and knew that, I don't know, maybe college football dead in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We'll see. We'll put that on hold. This will never be brought up, and especially when we go down there on November 15th. All right, one more clip to get into here on the Game Day Preview. As we said at the top, Kirk Herbstreit did join Isaac Stoops as well as Joe Castiglione Jr. on the Family Business this week, talking on both quarterbacks, John Mateer and Bryce Underwood, the number one or one of the number one storylines going into this weekend.
Well, I think really for both quarterbacks, we're going to find out a lot more about kind of where they are. Bryce Underwood, the 5-star number 1 ranked player in the country last year against Mateer, who was highly touted. I really love Mateer's look. I loved it last year, what he was able to do. He shows great quickness, not only with his ability to create and scramble, but as you guys know, that arm strength and familiarity with the system allows him to play fast. I think he's getting more and more comfortable with the new personnel around him. But this is really the week we find out where he and this offense truly are. But just watching him on the hoof, just watching what his ability are, 6'1", 225. I haven't seen him in person, but on camera, on film, and his lower half, he looks like he might be a guy that lives under the squat rack. That kind of feel to him. So he's not only quick and elusive, but he's able to pull out of arm tackles. And I think that part of his game, maybe on a national level, is really underappreciated. That was a great scramble there for a first down. And again, you can see the sudden change of direction. But Michigan will have to defend him, try to keep him in the pocket, and try to really test he and his wide receivers to kind of see what their timing and rhythm is. Because if I'm defending him, I've got to bottle him up. I can't let him get out and create and make plays. And Michigan's got a really good defense. So it'll be a lot of fun. Like I said, both quarterbacks, both offenses desperately needed to get better from where these two teams were a year ago. They made a lot of changes, most notably 2 new quarterbacks for both teams. And it's going to be exciting to kind of see how this one unfolds.
I concur, Mr. Herbstreit. Really cool. You can watch that entire interview here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel with Kirk Herbstreit, who will be on the call on Saturday with the great Chris Fowler, who I believe is going to be coming in extremely hot from the U.S. Open women's final on Saturday. Obviously, the men's final coming up on Sunday. That's going to do it for today's Game Day review or Game Day preview. We'll have the Game Day Rewind coming up on Monday. Instant reaction in between on Saturday. Just kind of final thoughts. Where are we at here going into this one?
I'm excited. I think
isn't it kind of like intense in a way too that I don't really know what to expect going into Saturday?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Is I feel like we don't know much about this team. We've been talking about them for really since they lost to Navy. What's this thing going to look like this year? You bring in a new quarterback, all the new receivers, offense alignment, a new system on offense. Your defense you feel good about. You add a guy like Kendall Daniels, who I think is going to be a big X factor on Saturday. Like kicker, I think is going to be used on Saturday.
Sure.
There's all these questions about Oklahoma. Nobody knows what it's going to look like, but we're finally going to at least have some answers, or at least feel like we know what this team's going to look like this year and what it could mean for the future of a lot of people.
You can either be a glass half full guy or a glass half empty guy, I guess, going into Saturday. You can come see us on Saturday afternoon, tailgate at the Oval. We'll be back out there recording a live unofficial 40 podcast. George, myself, Carrie Burdock, Bob Persbillo might even stop by going into game day, kickoff, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, College Game Day on Saturday morning here in Norman. And you're right, as we talked about at the beginning, I would imagine by about Friday afternoon, you're going to start seeing people circulate either Oklahoma City or down here in Norman. Looking forward to all of it. We'll see you back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. You can check out our interview with Josh Pate as well as the instant reaction coming up on Saturday with George and myself from Owen Field. For George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you. Have fun this weekend. They're going to need you.